Welcome back to the program. Sometimes there are important events that happen over the course of the weekend, and I don't get to talk about them on the day of. But thankfully, I do get to speak about them eventually, like on a Monday. So yesterday, case in point, was International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And there were a lot of posts online talking about how we need to do a far better job than what we are doing right now in combating racism and other forms of discrimination here in Canada and elsewhere around the world. We often say that it's easy to look elsewhere outside of our own country and say, oh, isn't that a terrible situation? And we forget that discrimination happens right here at home every single day. And so it's important that when these days do happen, that we honor them by having conversations about the importance of fighting back against systemic racism. We can't just have these chats on the day that's designated for them. It has to be a year-round thing. But certainly we do need to draw attention on the day of as well. So we're drawing attention the day after the day of, if you will. Joining me on the line to have that conversation very graciously is Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Fareed, thank you so much for coming back on the program.
Hi, Jess. Thank you for having me back.
Hey, anytime. And I hope that you've been well since the last time we spoke as well.
Yes, well, spring is arriving. We've got warm temperatures and restrictions have been lifted, so things are hopefully looking up for the spring and summer.
Indeed. It feels like a lot of people have a lot more hope right now. And that is interesting at a time like this when we're having the conversation that we're about to have related to International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, because there are a lot of events happening in the world right now that are really, truly concerning. But I have hope in that we are having conversations like this one where we can shine a light on it and hopefully mobilize some action.
Well, truly, we need to have these conversations, and yes, it's very positive that the conversations are happening, but one of the things I keep saying is that we can have conversations, that's all well and good, but we need to move beyond conversations because actions speak louder.
Yes, very true. I could not agree with you more. And there are, a lot of issues right now that I think are really sitting top of mind for so many people, more so than they have in the past when we talk about systemic racism in our institutions here in Canada and elsewhere. But certainly one of the really so moving and upsetting issues right now has to do with anti-Asian racism and hatred, evidence that we have seen plain as day in Georgia, in the United States, in the Atlanta area, with the just horrific killings of 8 people at a number of locations. It's really hitting home for people right now just how terribly members of the Asian community have been treated, especially in this last year.
Well, yes, over the last year, we don't have to look to the United States to see what's going on. We can look here in Canada. Over the last year in Canada, there has been an increase of 600% in anti-Asian hate crimes. And that's on the low side. Some estimates put it at closer to 700%. So there is clearly anti-Asian racism out there, and it's connected to COVID, and it's connected to the words of former U.S. President Donald Trump, who put the moniker China virus on the COVID-19 virus, and of course that elicited responses from people who have prejudicial attitudes already to target people of Chinese, Korean, Japanese, anyone who looks Chinese in their racial either slander or physical attacks.
Mm-hmm. It's so awful, and just this whole last year has been so difficult for everyone. But to add in that just abhorrent racism and the way that people have been targeted, it's heartbreaking, and we all have a responsibility to step up and intervene if something like that is going on, however that you can. And that's been a lot of the messaging in the last number of days with a number of rallies and vigils that have taken place to honor victims and to draw attention to this issue. It's that idea of action must be taken, which obviously echoes what you were saying earlier.
Yes, action must be taken, and certainly citizens need to speak out if they see something or if they witness something. If they see something on social media among people that are within their circle, they need to call it out. But beyond that, we also need legislative action. For years now, I and others in the anti-racism activist community have been calling on the federal government to take very strong action with regard to racism and hate in Canada. And we get we welcome the statements when the Prime Minister or ministers or MPs make them about how, racism and hate have no place in this country. But until you have the tools available to challenge it legislatively and legally, then all you're doing is issuing words and feel-good statements. And frankly, feel-good statements are not going to cut it. We are at a time where hate and white supremacy is on the rise. It's been fueled by U.S. politics. We've got politicians here in Canada who believe in a very hard right-wing ideology. We've got voices on social media. We've got platforms like Rebel Media, which has become a source of hate online, and yet we don't have the legislative or legal tools available to the public, to the citizens, to actually take action against this. And we saw another example mentioned today. If you recall, Colton Boushie was an Indigenous youth who was killed by a white farmer in Saskatchewan. The white farmer got off at the trial, and today was the response from the family to a public report. And one of the things that they said in response to the report, which said that racism was evident in the way that the RCMP handled that case, they also said that there needs to be action taken with respect to social media, which is gasoline that pours fuel onto the fire of hate.
Yeah, the social media aspect of this is deeply troubling. Any news outlet understands how bad the comments can be sometimes on certain posts, certain articles that are published, and it's an ongoing conversation of how do you manage those sorts of comments, and because you can't let things that are hateful stand, you have to do something. And this is, I think, an evolving conversation. But to your point, action does need to be taken, and even on a personal level, we could all go and do some work in terms of voicing our opinions, lobbying our local politicians to take action on this, and our representatives that, serve at Queen's Park or, on Parliament Hill. So there's something that we can all do here.
Yes, we can, and I think it's also up to citizens and voters to pressure politicians to take the action that's necessary. We've got a amazing experiment in Canada. We are the most ethnically diverse nation on the planet. 1 out of 4 people in this country are now belong to a visible minority, and that number is going to grow over time. And we've got some warts, obviously, to deal with, but we manage to live in relative harmony with each other and in an accepting fashion of people who are different in some way. However, you've got these voices and these elements in society who don't accept that. And they are constantly lobbing mortars at people who are trying to maintain that harmony. And unless citizens get their politicians to give them the tools to take action to maintain that sense of harmony that we have, and I'm not saying things are perfect. We've got problems. But the thing is, when you compare us to in other parts of the world, we have it pretty good. But in order to maintain that, we need the tools at our disposal to make sure that we're able to tackle the voices and the prophets of hate when they come knocking at our door.
Well, Fareed, thank you so much for, joining us this afternoon and sharing your thoughts on this, but also on the work that you continually do to shine a light and to try to enact as much change as possible. Thank you so much again.
Okay, thank you for having me again.
Take good care, okay?
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. That's Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate, talking about International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and some of the ongoing issues that have been top of mind in the headlines in the last little while. These aren't just headlines. These are instances and incidents that have impacted real people in their day-to-day lives. And we have a responsibility to our fellow citizens to stand up for them and to not allow for hatred to proliferate. And so I'm really grateful to Fareed for making himself available so often to have these conversations. I know it's a lot of emotional labor, so I'm appreciative of it and, really do take what he says to heart. We need to take a quick break for traffic and weather. On the other side of that break, we are going to connect with one of the organizers of a rally and vigil that is set for this Saturday. It's called the Stop Asian Hate Vigil and Rally, and it's directly talking about what we just discussed with Fareed Khan, this increase of incidents of hatred against members of the Asian community. And so we're going to have a conversation with one of the organizers. Coming up next on Let's Talk London on 980 CFPL.